what we're about to see, by the way, I know this is probably a huge whiplash going from one thing to another. So I appreciate you guys working with me on this. But we're about to talk about something that I'm extremely excited about in the product. As you guys know, with Atlas Earth, everything has been we create and we curate. And when I say we, I mean Atlas Reality. And I'm sure all of you have seen games out there. Brian Oline, he messaged me over the weekend with one of these cool UGC games where UGC stands for user generated content, where players are creating structures and things like that. And for the better part of a year, Bo and I and Will, actually, I think Will, you started on this. Well, we've been trying to figure out, well, how do we introduce something with the complexity of UGC? And so Russell on our team, who's been kind of working in isolation, has been really doing a good job putting this together. But I want to set the stage as UGC is obviously like endless. People can create, millions of different iterations. So we'll talk about this another time, but it's going to be really important how we roll out Creator so that it doesn't just create a flood of what I'll call lovingly flea market products. We don't want people just, creating, shitty content, if you will. And so our goal is how do we open up Creator in a way that is still semi curated and a way that teaches people and rewards people. And so an opportunity we saw was landmarks. So imagine a world, and this is going to require everybody's imagination a little bit, but bear with me, is imagine a world where we release landmarks like the White House, like the Senate, like, you know, Jackson Square in New Orleans, what have you, Big Ben. Instead of us as Atlas Reality building it, we hold a contest. And for a week, we tell players, come design the White House using the creator tool. And we get hundreds, if not thousands, of submissions of people who've created the White House, their version of the White House. And basically, the winning design, much of it by popular vote, and then ultimately from the top 10, I think we reserve the right to pick the winning design, will get put into the game. And now this creates this feedback loop, which is, wow, I've created something and now it's actually in the game. And you guys saw how people fight like crazy for the presidency. I think people are really going to fight to become the architect of the White House, the architect of Big Ben. So there's just a lot of really cool ways that we plan to curate this feature. And I just want to set the stage for that because I think this takes what Atlas Earth does to a brand new level, on user generated content. And obviously there's a lot of complexities with it. So with all that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I want you guys to see, but I just want to set the stage for you, Russell. So, people can kind of imagine the use case for what you're showing as of today. And by the way, this is not quite ready for public use yet, but I felt like as a team, everybody deserves to see the progress thus far instead of, waiting until we're like a week away from launch or something like that, right? So take this as a work in progress. And Russell, yeah, feel free to take it
Sure
away.
thing. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So, first of all, a lot of you may not know me, but may have noticed me popping in and out of meetings, and more recently in the engineering stand-ups, I've been rambling on about my work on this project that I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering about for all this time. So, as a bit of a formal introduction, my name is Russell, and I have been working pretty independently on this project, more recently with Eric and Ella for around half a year, on the Skunkworks project, which I have finally come here to give a technical demo and showcase to all of you. So I guess we could just jump right into it. It sort of all begins here in this initial menu screen, which has two choices to proceed. We can start with the simpler one, but I'll cover both. So at the top, you can input a number that controls the sort of size of the grid space that you're eventually going to build onto. So for now, let's choose 3, which generates a 3 by 3 grid space where each grid is 30 by 30. If you notice, it sort of aligns with the size of a parcel in game. So from here, you can open up a sidebar with a list of pre-built models, which can then be dragged onto the grid. The user is, of course, able to control the position orientation of the models using these transformation helpers. So in the X, Y, and Z. And then you have a full 360 degrees of rotation using this little half circle. Or if we open up the shortcuts menu, you can see that the user can also use their arrow keys to just control or give a better sense of control. So in the same direction, up and down, rotation as well. A sort of quick detail about this is that if you notice, the models are moving according to a grid snapping system. That is, if you look at the bottom of this cactus, you can see that if I press the arrow key once, it moves sort of one grid space in that direction. Same in all other directions, as well as up and down. And the purpose of this is to sort of make it easier to align objects with one another. So imagine you have a fence and a house, and you want to make sure the fence is touching the house without making sure like the fence goes into the house or there's a gap. With this, everything lines up to each grid square, so it'll be easier to control where things are in the world. Of course, you can also delete objects using this button right here, or you can look at the shortcut menu and press X, it'll do the same thing. And if you want to clear your scene, you can just press the button or press C and it'll do the same thing. Another nifty thing that I want to point out is if you look at the shortcuts menu, near the bottom is a mention of camera shortcuts. So if the user holds down their shift button, we enter what I like to call FPS mode, where the user can fly around the scene, much like a first-person shooter game using their keyboard and mouse. All operations to transform objects, of course, still work in this mode. So really, whatever preference you want to do, just depends. The default camera mode, of course, is mouse only with simple clicking and dragging to orbit. If you use a 3D software before, this should be pretty familiar to you. We can also take a step backwards. Oops. Take a step backwards back to the start screen. The first option, ooh,
It's cool though. I like that astronaut sitting, waiting.
yeah, the first option assumes that everything is in a square. So when I put in three, it ended up being a 3x3 grid. But that may not necessarily always be the case with the user. With the second option, the user is able to select a custom grid that is composed of parcels that may better align with the things they own in the game. So for now, let's just pick a random shape like this. And if we submit the shape, we can see the grid takes on that shape. Everything still works in this mode, so you can still drag objects into the
And Russell,
scene.
if I may just add, what's which is obviously very evident, but I like to be the stupid guy in the room, is LPUs right now, legendary parcel upgrades in the game, are single parcels. What I love about this is we are introducing this idea that you can customize a group of parcels together, right? So a house, or I use White House as an example. That's not a single parcel, right? That's multiple parcels. And so you guys can see how this evolves into like bigger assets on the map. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's imagine if you have like a really big building that may not necessarily be a square, even something as simple as a rectangle. With this, you can really define any shape as a foundation you want. Um, Beyond that, we do have basic saving and loading mechanisms. So say I drag in a bunch of things, make a little scene that I'm happy with, and I want to save this and return to it later. I just have to press the save scene button here. And then if I reload the page and press the load scene button right here, it'll take me back to where I was. All the models are back to where they were, and you can start building again. Yeah.
Nice. Very
Beyond
cool.
that, that's pretty much, yeah, everything I have to showcase. If anybody has any questions about the way anything works, I'm more than happy to answer, but thank you everybody for watching.
Thanks, Russell. I'm sure I see Murillo clapping. I'm sure there's some questions, thoughts, ideas. But, Russell, if you don't mind, like, oh, Alex, you have your hand raised? You're on
I
mute.
can
Oh,
I can hold off.
oh, I mean, I was just going to say a bit more about the vision stuff, which is the components, the ingredients, the pieces. Chris and Ella and I and the design team were talking about, imagine giving away premium parts. Imagine brands, I'm gonna make this up, but like, McDonald's says they want to sell their golden arches as a part, you know? So those may not be default parts that exist for everybody, but somebody could potentially in the future use Atlas Bucks or some sort of currency to unlock parts that are on the marketplace, right? So this isn't just build something cool. It's also potentially a monetization feature where other companies who want to leverage their IP, maybe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle says, oh, I want to sell some, statues of our IP that people can put onto their, whatever it may be. So I think, if you imagine where this goes, there's far reaching implications of what just this tool can do. And I think you guys are seeing it. I mean, we just hit over
Mhm.
300,000 weekly users. So we're approaching that scale where people are going to use the shit out of this. Even if it's 1%, that's what, 3,000 people using this thing, right? And I guarantee it's going to be more than 1% using it. So it's just going to be really cool to see how the community takes this and runs with this and how we can sell ingredients and parts or give them away in the season challenges. Who knows? But there's a lot of things we can do with this thing. Alex, if you want to.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So just as someone who has a small interest in doing kind of 3D modeling as part of other little projects, I noticed that you had like the 3-axis of movement and 1-axis of rotation. But I was just kind of curious, I didn't see scaling or potentially rotating in other directions. Was that like a stylistic choice, or was that kind of outside of the bounds of the scope of the project right now?
Scaling is in the works. I'm currently working on that. I have been thinking about other axes of rotation, but if you sort of think about like
The
if we're
snapping.
going to be relying on like pre-built models, I wouldn't
Mhm.
necessarily like see any use in rotating a tree like on its side, for
On its side,
instance.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it might make sense for certain things, like maybe a palm
Sure,
tree that's leaning to
yeah.
the side, but I know it doesn't work for everything. So I was just
Yeah,
curious.
I think Russell, I mean, the scaling thing makes sense. I think, Alex, we want to balance simplicity. Like our goal is not to compete with Blender, right? Our goal is to really
Right,
create a
right.
tool. Our goal is to create a tool that people will use to dress up their land. And so I think we have to kiss that, you know, um, cone of efficiency, if you will, of like, what is the most we give you? Where if it becomes too much, it becomes too much of a burden for like the grandma who plays our game to come in. I'm not saying
Of
that,
course.
grandmas are going to be doing this, but they might. And so we want to create some, we have a much broader audience than you will a Minecraft or a Roblox where it's just children that, so we have to balance that. And I'm not saying there's we don't know the answers. I think, in my opinion, it's better to start simpler and add on things as we get requests than start out too complicated, because I think that might turn people off out the gate. Merlo, your hand was up first, so and
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. I have just two questions. I'm sure we can talk about more about this later because I would love to talk about this 'cause it looks really good. Congratulations. Uh, but how? So you're saying we are using kind of like prefab based modeling. Are materials a part of that too? So is the player, is the user able to control like colors or the way material looks in this editor?
so
In
I'm
this
not
set, go
qualified to
ahead.
answer. Okay, no,
Yeah.
go ahead, Russell. You might already know.
Not currently. With these models that I'm using now, these have just been ripped for the demonstration off the internet. So the materials came with them. It really depends on how the models are being constructed, I suppose. Yeah.
And I think to that end, just so I'm sure other people are wondering, the design team, Ella and Chris, they haven't come in just yet with. So I think the next stage, if I'm allowed to, and Russell, I don't even know if this is accurate, but I imagine the next stage is you working with Ella and Chris on what these prefabs look like, what the optionalities are to those prefabs. I'm sure Chris will talk to Murillo and Morgan about the limitations of performance implications on mobile. So I think there's a lot we need to figure out on in terms of the models and how they appear and what we can do with them. But this is more so look at where we're going. But we may not just, obviously this demo is just full of trees, but the final item will be probably less tree heavy and more, I don't know though, our people really like trees. But yes, we are yet to get to that point, I would say.
All right, yeah, that's it.
But yeah, we do want that custom. Aaron?
Piggybacking off of a couple of the other questions, like Alex asks about the angles of rotation. I noticed that it's purely a grid coordinate system. Is that being done with a consideration towards optimization, or is that just a limitation of the builder?
So the grid right now, as you know, each parcel is 30 feet by 30 feet in Atlas Earth. So the 30 by 30 is really, I would say, user experience decision to make sure that people understand the scale versus what they're going to see in game. Obviously, in game, those parcels are much smaller, and help them with kind of the artistic style. Obviously, there's going to be technological limitations, I think, that Russell and Chris and Ella and Morgan and his team are going to need to work through. But and Russell, you probably have an answer, maybe, but for me, the grid was a must-have because it establishes kind of that, scale to the real world. Because ultimately, we really need that in order to have that one-to-one relationship with the land that you're buying. So, I think a lot of people, and even our marketing, when you open the game, which Aaron, you're no stranger to the tutorial, you hear Derek talk about, 900 square feet at a time, right? And that's literally what each block here represents. That's 900 squares. So that's really the user experience decision. I don't know if sorry, Russell, I'm not trying to prevent you from answering your own product.
No, yeah, that was pretty much what I was gonna say. Optimization of the grid system is something that's sitting in the back of my head. But for now, for this demo, like I just wanted to make sure everything
Okay.
works.
Yeah. And like also is like I'm actually learning how to use Blender myself for other side things, and also because it's fun, playing around with things. Will there eventually be functionality for like I guess you could call it community driven like model contests where you could like submit your own design of an asset to be put into the bank of things for people to use?
Oh, I see. So obviously we're starting with the landmark contests, which are like larger asset contests. Um, that's an interesting thought, which is I think you're talking about the individual ingredients, right? The
Yeah.
parts.
So like you have the cactus, the bush, the palm tree, the spruce, etc.
That's
Like what
interesting.
if, people can make variants of those or uh
Effectively
Yeah.
trade an asset store.
yeah, effectively. Thank you, Alex.
We haven't gotten that far, but I do think, like I had kind of hinted at with what if McDonald's wants to sell their golden arches? That's effectively kind of where this could go. Obviously, I'm glad you're talking about it, but that's where I think this can go. Um, I would be lying if I told you that we had talked about how we get there. But ultimately, those are things we do want to do. But we'd have to figure out the physics on what that looks like too, like that flow. But yes, I think ultimately maybe we start with brands because again, everything is marketing. Even though I know that sounds frustrating to hear, especially because I'm a career marketer, but everything is about how you introduce it, right? And a lot of the times, I mean, even look at Facebook, they were like, oh, you have to have a Harvard EDU. Like, so how you introduce something to the world and having that scarcity is going to be really important to how that thing does, versus just saying, hey, everyone, we have this new thing, come try it. And then it just becomes like, a garbage festival. That would not be ideal. So we'll have to think through how we do that. Maybe it's just through premium brands first, and then we slowly drip it to people invite only. I don't know, but there's something to that.
All right. That
Cool. I
covered my
know
questions.
we're awesome. I know we're over on time. Russell, thank you so much. This is like so cool to see. I love seeing stuff like this. And hopefully this gets you guys kind of thinking about like, man, this is a lot crazier than I thought. I mean, that's really what I want you guys to think, because it's such an open kind of door of where we can take this. And we are working on some crazy shit like community feed and creator and all these things that I don't think even our users know are coming. And you can imagine when they find this shit out, they're going to be like, holy crap, this is next level. Cool. So we have recorded this team meeting. Again, if you have any questions on how we're planning to kind of administer the reviews and bonuses, read through Manning's Notion doc. It's on the team page. Manning would be the right person to ask. Russell and I and Chris and Ella are likely the right people to talk to about ideas around Creator. Again, as you guys saw, it was pretty early stage, but I really wanted you guys to see what we're working on so that you can have your input now with ideas now, so we can start thinking about these things as we build it. Cool. So appreciate everybody joining. I guess if there's any last questions in general, happy to take it. Otherwise, feel free to message me, and have a great weekend. Also, monthly challenges launches November 1st, so that'll be huge. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna stop recording.
Thank you.